Without a doubt.
And we've already touched on, you can't have a newscast that's called Zetetic.news without talking about the shape of the earth or the essence of reality as
Mm-hmm.
far as space goes.
Right.
And this parlays into a later part of this discussion between Joe Rogan and
Mm-hmm.
John Carmack because, unsurprisingly,
Mm.
this obviously very intelligent, articulate principal engineer for video games is also fascinated with blasting off in a basically a pneumatic rocket
Mm-hmm.
out off of Earth. And he,
Wow.
like Elon, had put his money where his mouth was into aerospace engineering. I'm an engineer. I'm smart. I can get off world, etc. Achieve this Elysium type goal to tie back to the earlier
Mm-hmm.
um, gesticulation about
Mm-hmm.
that quote fictional uh, depiction in the movie.
Right.
I want to play this clip from another part of the interview where he talks about his experiments in space and his relative success with that. So let's check it out.
Let's check that out. Yeah.
Are you done with the rocket world?
So I used to think about it a lot more, even after I was kind of out of it, where getting out of rockets, my wife is wiser than I am in many ways, where she had put a kind of a limit. This is John's crazy rocket money, and you are not going to bankrupt the family by pursuing rocket dreams. And I was doing it part-time, and eventually we got to the point where we had 1 year where we had an operating profit for a little aerospace company we were working for. We were doing some NASA and Air Force and Rocket Racing League. That was great. These manned rocket planes we built that they got to fly around and have some racing with. Some stuff that I was very proud of, but we reached a point where there's this trap that a lot of companies like that can get into, and I saw a number of them in it, where you go into this thinking that we're going to change the world, we're going to do this massive thing, we want to colonize space, all of this, but you get stuck in this area where, all right, there are opportunities for us. We can get government contracts to do various work. There's work we can do for NASA and Department of Defense. And you tell yourself that, well, we'll do this and we'll be using their money to fund the real dream of the rocket ships that we want to build. But I've never seen it work out like that. You wind up kind of stuck in this drip feed of you can get a few new contracts and you can keep the lights on. And the government does this really largely intentionally, where they say it's good for the United States to have some level of grassroots aerospace companies, these small technology companies. It actually covers a whole bunch of material science and lots of different things. It's good to have these small companies exist. So the government doles out this drip feed of contracts where you can keep your researchers and engineers kind of working, putting some things together. And it was a fork in the road there. We could have gone down that path, but decided that no, we were going to try like 1 more year. I'll put the money into it. We're going to go for it. It's like suborbital or bust. I'm, getting the 100-kilometer reusable vehicles. And we didn't quite make it. We got to like 92 kilometers, and I'm, out in space, some lovely pictures of like the flare of the sun and spinning around in the black sky and Balut coming out for reentry and things that I was proud of. But we just didn't quite make it. And I was at that point where I had to say, it's like, all right, this is the end of the road. I did wind up selling most of the assets to some of the team members that raised some other funding to continue on. But one of my biggest lessons from that is I don't think I can do a proper job splitting my focus part-time between different things, because I was still full on id Software and doing the gaming. I was like 40 hours at it and 20 hours at Armadillo. And I just wasn't able to give it the focus that it needed. I don't know how Elon can, have 5 companies that he's involved in to some degree. I think that me personally, I need to have some level of focus. So I was saying if I go back into it, I want to do it full time. I have my crazy ideas for things that I'd like to try in rocketry, but largely I think SpaceX is doing an amazing job. It is, again, things sneak up on people. They don't notice the world changing around them. But this was the science fiction future that we wanted in the 50s and 60s. You know, we have a billionaire that's gone out and built the world's best rocket ship that wants to go to Mars and is building the rocket ship to do that. This is the movie scenario. It's almost, the only thing is in movies, it wouldn't have taken the decade plus time that it takes. It somehow would have been compressed into 3 or 4 years. So it takes longer in reality, but even the things you want to see in the movies are actually happening here. So I think
that's enough material for like a whole series of podcasts by itself. Like that's a lot
to unpack
of revelation of the method. I mean, he goes into the whole bureaucratization and pigeonholing of these so-called aerospace projects, and the gist that he sends out is basically like, oh well, I didn't have enough money, and the government is not necessarily the best organization to help us further this scientific goal, but ultimately, it's kind of impossible. I don't know how Elon can do it. I guess he's got a lot of extra money to play with. Because he himself, this is like, a high IQ technologist. And he's like, we couldn't really get vehicles to travel a certain speed. And
I got to 92 kilometers and I had to call it quits because he didn't have as much money as Elon.
Oh, yeah, it's just a matter of money, I guess. Well, I mean, hey,
this drip feed. What about the drip? What about the drip feed?
Man, he said drip feed a lot. In other words, here's some crumbs from the taxpayer extortion ring table.
I mean, and this is a purportedly smart guy, right? And he's not even like seemingly aware of who finances the governments themselves,
right?
Is grant money the only money available for this supposedly valuable venture? When
and it's just a matter of like a sprinkling of select contracts that may or may not be available to any given grassroots, in quote, aerospace organization that the government recognizes that it's good for there to be a grassroots aerospace program.
Look,
here and there with companies.
When you look at the level of compartmentalization, it is hard for people to wrap their heads around, but they have to.
Mind-boggling.
Everybody has a relative who is on the periphery, at least, of this beast.
Yeah.
I have a relative via marriage who works at NASA, and people don't go astronaut or what, like space exploration. I've asked him.
Yeah.
He says it's like any other desk job you can imagine, and he's an electronics specialist, like he's an electrician. I think he designs circuit boards, and he says everything he does is related to weather monitoring. So he designs components that, I mean, he's given specs, he's given requirements, and components are designed to perform certain functions on certain vehicles, which he may or may not be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
As far as their ultimate mission and other related details, their blueprints, etc. It's like anybody who is into industry news on manufacturing for like the big Samsung, Apple, blah blah blah. They're all these companies are super secretive. They have not non-disclosures with their employees. They keep working groups in silos for strategic reasons, and nobody knows the whole picture except somebody knows the picture.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
And then, I mean, you see something come out in the news recently, like the Indian Space Agency is red-faced over a moonwalk video that they basically posted. I think there's something on Instagram that you posted, but it's kind of like, isn't it obvious at this point that much of what constitutes space economics are these